Alright, let me tell you a story about Mark. Mark just graduated middle school and was getting ready to attend Mission Valley High School. At 14 years old, Mark was at a crossroads in his life. On one hand, he was a fairly studious kid and was pretty engaged with his math and science classes. You know, a typical STEM nerd who played too many video games. On the other hand though, Mark was about to make some older friends, engage in some extracurricular distractions, if you get what I'm saying. He probably didn't have the most supportive home environment to handle this trip period. So anyways, I sat next to Mark in freshman physics at Mission Valley, and the big thing on all of our minds was science fair. We had all summer, literally all summer, to come up with an idea for a science fair project. And that first week of school, we were supposed to formally announce the title of our project. It was basically like putting our names in the goblet of fire. Now, everyone in our class had the typical uninspired ideas. One girl grew plants with different kinds of music playing. Someone else grew plants under different kinds of light. I grew plants by watering them with solutions of different salinity. One kid who looked like Pigpen grew some kind of mold on an old sandwich. The big emphasis that was shoved down our throats was that our projects needed to be achievable, realistic and achievable. Achievable. They needed to be achievable. The science fair was going to be 50% of our grade for the first semester. They needed to be realistic. They needed to be achievable. You have to present at the end of the semester. They need to be achievable. You catch my drift, right? They needed to be achievable. So our boy Mark, STEM nerd about to turn teen ganja warrior, takes all this information in and comes up with an idea that's going to remedy his quickly spiraling academic trajectory. A grand idea that will land him first prize if he pulls it off, but an achievable idea that his teachers will appreciate. So Ms. Darbus, our physics teacher, is going around the classroom asking all of her acne-riddled students for their formal project declarations. Really, it did play out like a ritual, like you had to go to the front of the class and state your name and project title. One by one, we declare our projects, and then it's Mark's turn. Mark saunters over to the podium. Ms. Darbus is already reaching for the Tylenol, and this motherfucker, I shit you not, goes,
"What's up? The name's Mark, and I'm gonna build a time machine."
A time machine. A fucking time machine. 14-year-old Marky Mark, who hasn't learned the difference between force and mass. This seminal genius is gonna go full Donnie Darko on Eskridge, Kansas, and create a first-of-its-kind Schwarzschild wormhole. Ms. Darbus, I'm sure, was contemplating jumping in a wormhole herself, but she resisted the urge to quit her job on the spot and decided to cordially give Mark some advice. And mind you, this conversation was in front of the entire class. She says,
"Mark, I'm impressed by your ambition, but that doesn't seem very realistic."
They needed to be realistic. They needed to be achievable and realistic. Mark, however, was completely unfazed by Ms. Darbus's trepidation and brushed her off, insisting that he had a plan. Did that plan take into account the fact that flux capacitors aren't fucking real? Or how was he gonna get his hands on exotic matter? Like, was he planning on driving up to Fermilab and asking for the market price of a 10-ounce bottle of negative mass particles? He never did get that far when we asked him about it. He muttered something about pending patents and foreign government espionage. But here in the real world, we were perplexed about this. Keep in mind, this was an honors physics class, and to this point, Mark had been an honors level student. Seeing him so dismissive of 50% of his grade when the class had hardly started was bewildering. So every week after that, we had some kind of science fair related assignment to hand in. This wasn't just busy work. These assignments were a way to break a large undertaking like a science fair project into digestible tasks so that Ms. Darbus could be certain we were making adequate progress. For example, one week we would need to give a detailed hypothesis. Another week we'd need to give an update on our data collection, things like that. I remember one assignment we had to hand in a bibliography, and this was around the time right before you could find repeatable information on the internet, so we had to go to the library for that one. But every time an assignment was due, all eyes were on Mark. Like, Marky Mark, how's that time machine coming along, bud? And every week, like clockwork, he'd be like,
"Yeah, don't worry about it."
How Ms. Darbus allowed this kid to be such a delinquent, I have no idea. I was still stuck in the concept that Mark was willingly defaulting on 50% of his grade, but I was also very interested in how this charade was going to end, because it had to end eventually. So the big day of the science fair arrives, an entire semester worth of work distilled into a single day. This was the biggest school project most of us had completed, and stress was at an all-time high, but not on our own behalf, because we had kept up with the weekly assignments. You know, we already did our experiments. We already wrote our final reports. Mark, on the other hand, had ostensibly completed exactly none of his assignments. He probably hadn't finished constructing the time machine since we hadn't heard any reports of rifts in the space-time continuum. If I was him and I had built the time machine, I would travel back in time and pick a different science fair project. So anyways, this day that was supposed to be a celebration of scholastic achievement was overshadowed by one conspicuous absence, and I'll give you 3 guesses who that was. Mark H.G. Wells incarnate was nowhere to be found during the fair. I think we were all a little excited to see him try to bullshit his way through his presentation, so it was a little disappointing that he was missing. None of his teachers or friends had heard from him. Rumors swirled in the absence of information. I mean, maybe he did escape this temporal realm after all. Maybe he fucking Mandela affected himself out of existence. So the science fair was on a Friday. On the following Monday, the prodigal son returned. darned. Mark strolled in as if nothing was out of the ordinary, and to be honest, if it wasn't for his conspicuous absence, we might have been fooled. He looked like he was well fed, he had color in his skin, basically we were relieved he hadn't been kidnapped. But there was something different about him, and it wasn't any kind of residual radiation poisoning from the time travel. Rather, there was something peculiar going on with his right pinky finger. You see, it was in a splint. Naturally, we asked Mark about this new entry, and all he would say is,
I broke my finger.
and that was an excuse for missing the science fair. I mean, of course it didn't retroactively absolve him from refusing to complete 4 months worth of weekly assignments, but it seemed like a decent enough reason to be absent from the biggest day of our academic careers. Except that wasn't the whole story at all. Come to find out from his friends, when Mark said,
I broke my finger.
what he really meant was, hi, I'm Mark, and because I didn't want to face the consequences of not having a science fair project, I grabbed my right pinky with my left hand and pulled back until I dislocated my metacarpophalangeal joint.
What's wrong with it? I think it's dislocated. I'll fix it.
Fuck, dude, that's hardcore. You know what would have been easier though? Doing any of the assignments that you missed. I mean, the easiest one was to come up with an idea. Just grow a plant. You don't even have to do it. Just say you're gonna do it. I know you're into DXM. Just say you're gonna water plants with different levels of cough syrup. Maybe learn about the weed that you're smoking and experiment with growing. Grow plants in soil with different amounts of sand. Grow plants with Gatorade because plants crave electrolytes. Grow plants under TV light at night. Grow plants with your own saliva. Any of those options would have been easier than forcibly breaking your own finger. Or, if that's too hard, you could have just showed up to school and not broken your finger. You still didn't do the science fair project. Whether or not you have a medical reason to miss school that day won't undo that. And this way you don't fall behind in your other classes. Just show up and take the L, bro. And even if that's too unsavory an option, you could have just played hooky without breaking your finger. Like, show up or don't, whatever. You don't have to though. So anyways, that was the story about the time Mark broke his finger to get out of the science fair. This story feels like a modern version of one of Aesop's fables, so I'll give a concluding thought. I was surprised to learn this is actually somewhat a common occurrence, kids breaking their fingers to get out of school. So if anyone from that cohort is watching this and is contemplating causing themselves bodily harm to circumvent attending school, a few pieces of advice. Don't. Really think through the consequences of such an action. Make a pros and cons list. Like, pro, you get to skip school. Con, you have a broken finger. Trust me, broken bones suck. I broke my pinky 15 years ago, not on purpose, mind you, and it's still swollen and stiff. Let's see. Pro, you can watch daytime television. Con, your parents have to pay medical bills. Pro, you don't have to do any schoolwork for the day. Con, you have to do twice as much the next day. And let's throw on some more cons, like it's illegal to skip school. If your doctors find out the injury is self-inflicted, you'll probably be put in a psych treatment program. You can't play sports if you skip school. Your teachers won't respect you as much, making it a lot harder to get your grades up. If you skip too often, you might get held back. And sure, the short-term allure of playing Pikmin or whatever might be tempting, but do yourself a favor and take 10 minutes to really think through your options. But leaving the message as an unwavering proclamation that your life will end if you skip school doesn't do anyone any favors. Because if you really think about it, regular school attendance and academic responsibilities can be demanding. Pile on top extracurricular activities, social pressures, potentially unsupportive home environments. Sometimes skipping school can be an attractive way for overwhelmed teams to feel a reprieve. So to pummel these kids with something that they already know, that skipping school is ultimately suboptimal, just adds to the stress. Instead, I'd like to offer something different. To those kids struggling with truancy that are watching this, take 15 minutes out of your day to reflect on what's going on. Reflect on why school is so unappealing to you. And this exercise isn't meant to convey that these reasons are juvenile in the grand scheme of things. I mean, you might have some pretty good reasons. Like, are you getting bullied at school? Do you feel like teachers are too mean to you? Is the workload just way too much? Did you recently go through a breakup? Is substance abuse making it difficult to concentrate? Is sleep deprivation making you too exhausted? Does the monotony of the school day just suck in general? Whatever the reasons are, whatever you're struggling with, just know there are people out there who care and whose job it is to help guide people like yourself. Chances are you probably have guidance counselors at your school. These people are professionals who help transitions, like preparing students for college and vocational careers. They have a wealth of knowledge on things like sex education and mental health. They can assist with organization and study habits, and they can mediate conflicts students have with teachers, parents, and peers. If your school doesn't have guidance counselors, or for whatever reason you don't like the ones at your school, don't be afraid to reach out to counselors at neighboring schools. So don't be like Mark. Talk to your guidance counselor before things get out of hand. Whether you realize it or not, there are people all around you that are ready and willing to support you and want you to succeed. Man, talk to them anyways. Most of the time these people are super nice and can offer help even for the most trivial problems. I certainly wish I'd use them as a resource when I had the opportunity. Oh, I almost forgot. This video is sponsored by